I'm holding the recorder between my teeth because my hands won't stop shaking. The gloves are gone. I don't remember when. The air tastes like iron, like blood that forgot how to be warm. There's movement under the ice. Not cracking, breathing. You can hear it if you stop long enough. "Kill the lights!" That was Owen. Or maybe memory pretending to be him. The sound bounced around the shaft until it felt like it came from inside my skull. Emily said something, short, terrified. I don't remember the words, only the tone, like a prayer that never learned its ending. The red emergency lights flicker. Each pulse is slower than the last, like a dying heart that refuses to quit. My breath fogs the recorder. Every time I inhale, it whispers back. The inscriptions on the walls move when the light hits them. They aren't reflections. They're muscle memory. Words that still remember being alive. We opened the wrong book. I said that out loud, didn't I? I don't know if it was me or the thing under the ice saying it through me. Father Ilario tried to stay calm. He told us not to look directly at the core. He said light could feed it. But the beam was already bleeding red, and I swear I saw a face forming beneath it. Something shaped like a man, smiling without a mouth. Owen shouted again. Emily cried. I crawled forward anyway. The floor vibrated like a heartbeat trapped in stone. Heat rose through my knees. The smell, burnt oil, hot metal. The sound grew until it wasn't sound anymore, just pressure. My teeth rattled. The ice started to hum, like a machine learning to pray. Don't touch the beam, I told myself. Don't look down. Then the light burst. White, so bright it erased color. The air collapsed. For a second I was weightless. Then the shaft screamed. Something under the ice pushed back. A shape slid past me fast, too fast, gone before I could reach it. The blood it left behind froze in patterns. Curling like letters, I almost understood. This isn't where it began, I whispered. The words tasted like rust. This is where we ran out of mercy. The hum fades. Only the wind remains. Somewhere above, the structure groans. Steel, complaining to heaven. The recorder's light is still red. I think that means it's working. The recorder's still running. 7 days earlier, Cambridge, Massachusetts. I wake before the alarm. The kitchen is gray with snowlight, and the coffee cools faster than my thoughts. The framed photo of Mary and Clara sits where the sun lands first. It remembers better than I do. I retired to make room for ordinary mornings. They don't fit yet. The bell outside counts the hour, and I lose the number halfway through. A knock at the door. Not urgent, just confident. I open it on the second try. A man in a dark coat stands there, badge already in hand, like the doorway belongs to him. Professor Hale? I'm Agent Marcus Reed. He steps in without asking. His voice carries the calm of someone used to ending conversations, not starting them. A folder lands on my table. Department of Defense, National Science Foundation, coordinates. A shaft cut into ice. 2 still frames catch red light that doesn't look like color at all. It looks like temperature learning how to think. Symbols stretch across an ice wall, and the camera's lens refuses to focus. We lost contact with Borealis Station. The last transmission contained this. He doesn't explain the scream or the drag mark. I see both anyway. The characters on the wall crawl across my vision long after I close the folder. Request denied. I say it first because saying it first makes it sound like a choice. He slides one more photo toward me. A string of Proto-Semitic roots, early Genesis rhythm. A line that doesn't exist in any edited scripture. Wrong in a careful way. No one reads that but you, Professor. He leaves. The folder stays. Silence comes back heavier than before. I call Clara because I don't want the next sound to be my mind changing itself. Dad, are you okay? I tell her I'm fine, that I'll be home for dinner. I mean it for a different week. When the line clicks, I'm already packing a small bag. Packing large would mean admitting I understood what was coming. On a note by the fridge, I write, "Back soon, Jay." The flight to DC is quiet. The city meets me in fog and noise. Division 73 hides behind glass and policy. Inside, security trades my wallet for a card that doesn't belong to me. The elevator hums louder than it needs to. Reed waits in a room too bright for the kind of truth he's about to show. The projector stutters through the last moments from Borealis. A tunnel. Red emergency light. Motion that doesn't obey the camera. The audio catches wind and breath together, like one pretending to be the other. I don't replay it. Once is enough for the bones. We coordinate with Canada through Eureka, but Borealis is US run. Blackout, 48 hours. The inscriptions appeared 3 days before that. The still photos show patterns in the ice, strokes too deliberate to be natural, too precise to be human. Proto-Semitic cadence with older pressure under it, I say. Your lens hates it because the edges aren't static. He nods. The room breathes once, long and mechanical. He slides a small card across the table. 5 lines, no heading. The kind of list designed to survive memory. Say these once before we land. I sign the papers. The kind that end with a promise not to die inconveniently. The projector shuts down. The silence feels earned. By the time we lift off from Anchorage, I've met the others. Dr. Emily Park, microbiologist. She talks like every sentence has been disinfected. Father Ilario Vance, Vatican envoy. His calm feels trained, not natural. Captain Owen Brooks, security. His silence speaks for him. Dr. Evan Price, geophysics. Tired eyes and too much hope. Reed rides with us, hands folded like prayer he won't admit to. The LC-130 shakes itself awake. Heat is something we imagine until the engines convince us otherwise. Introductions are short. Names feel temporary this far north. The Loadmaster's safety brief sounds like a prayer someone translated into checklist. Reed hands me the card. I read the rules aloud, because that's what he wants. And because I want to know how they sound when given shape. Rule 1. No one leaves the modules after 2100. Curfew is a door that locks itself from both sides. Rule 2. Do not photograph the inscriptions. Cameras are mirrors with better memories than people. Some reflections deserve to fade. Rule 3. If you hear prayer from below, you do not answer. Emily repeats the last 3 words under her breath. They sound heavier spoken twice. Rule 4. Do not vocalize the inscriptions. Owen says it flat, practiced. A rule against sound is its own echo. Rule 5. Keep the beam on the core at all times. Ilario folds the card and puts it away like a relic. I don't ask what the core is. We'll find out soon enough. Silence sits with us. The hum of the engines fills every space we don't claim. Emily sketches ice strata. Evan marks depths. Owen cleans the lens of a scope. Ilario counts breaths. Reed stares at nothing. Outside, white becomes condition. The aurora drifts tired across the horizon. We refuel once at a station that feels like a rumor. Someone mentions Eureka the way you mention a neighbor you'll never meet. I think about the 5 rules. 2 make sense. The rest will explain themselves, and I'm not sure I want to hear how. The helicopter transfer north is the color of static. Through the window, the world flattens into one argument between wind and distance. The station breaks from the haze, modular, small, surrounded by drifts that don't believe in boundaries. Antennas lean like crosses caught mid-prayer. The wind has teeth. Inside, the main habitat smells of diesel and something sweet the cold couldn't kill. Boot tracks stop mid-hurry. A whiteboard holds half a schedule that pretends to be a plan. A printer blinks, "No paper," until it becomes a warning. Every sound carries an echo that feels personal. They walk us through. Mainhab for sleeping and pretending. Science dome for reaching the edge of reason. Power for noise that passes as comfort. Storage tunnel colder than the air outside. Landing pad A13 and the shaft. A vertical argument with time. I can't see the bottom, and that feels deliberate. The radio check is clear. The ambient hum is not. It vibrates in my teeth. We gather in the galley. Reed repeats the rules because repetition feels like armor. Owen sets rotations in nouns and verbs only. Emily requests microscope hours. Evan, deeper radar. Ilario, light for the core. "Welcome to Borealis," someone says. The word feels ceremonial, like opening a book that already knows how it ends. My bunk faces a window that shows nothing until you stare long enough to see how much nothing weighs. I set the recorder on the shelf. Its red light blinks steady, patient. I tell myself this is procedural. A field audit wearing winter clothes. I'm here to confirm a camera error, file a report, go home. I tell myself the rules are for bureaucracy, not belief. I tell myself the ice doesn't care who watches it. I tell myself the dead are good at staying quiet. I'm wrong in ways that haven't learned to stop being true. When I first look down the shaft, the dome lights hesitate, then surrender. The cold near the railing carries the memory of every hand that touched it. I listen. It's wind. It's infrastructure. It's my pulse pretending to be calm. It's not breath. I say that twice so the recorder will remember it too. We mark the day in silence and call it progress. Nothing happens, and that feels like mercy. The station breathes with diesel and prayer. I choose to hear the diesel. Prayer can wait. Day 1 started with a quiet that pretended to be polite. We were still unpacking our habits, still convincing ourselves that a list of rules could be a fence. The shaft kept its mouth closed. The station breathed like a sleeping animal that didn't mind being watched. By noon, Evan had a line that did not belong to geology. Low, regular, patient. We leaned over the scope and listened with our teeth. It's rhythmic, but not mechanical. Emily kept her voice clipped and clean. The signal thumped at the edge of hearing, not a sound so much as pressure you mistake for your own pulse. I told her diesel can pretend to be anything in this cold. True enough to use, not true enough to keep. We logged times and amplitudes. Owen watched the door watch him back. Ilario wrote one word per page like he was paying for silence. Reed practiced responsible quiet. By evening, the line didn't drift. Weather wanders, machines confess. This held still like a verdict. We tried to sleep. The station hummed in a key I couldn't place. I lay on my bunk and listened to a room that felt like a body, and decided too late that I was part of it. Day 2 brought clarity I didn't want. Emily pulled a core from the last safe depth. Under the microscope, structure hid inside structure, channels so fine they felt imagined until the light obeyed them. It's not frozen. It's dormant. She didn't look at us. She watched the place where the world was choosing not to move. I didn't answer because my mouth felt like a church someone forgot to heat. Evan traced channels with a pencil he wasn't holding. Owen spent a long, deliberate breath. Reed adjusted nothing. Ilario's hand hovered like a blessing that had lost its grammar. We cut another section. The channels repeated with the kind of consistency engineers call quality and biologists call intent. Emily measured thickness, branching, variance. Numbers did what numbers do. Built a bridge you can walk without looking down. I looked down anyway. The bridge didn't sway. The ice did. Night pushed on the dome. The structure complained without asking for help. I wrote a page about dormancy and crossed it out so the recorder wouldn't learn the word before I was sure. Day 3 started with the radio pretending to be a clock. Static kept time. Seams ticked. The internal frequency was clean at 5 a.m., fussy by 6:15. Not chatter. Presence. Hebrew found me before meaning did. Older than what I teach. A cadence from drafts and margins. That's not possible. I wasn't speaking to anyone but the recorder. The voice pronounced my name carefully, like a teacher demonstrating a tool. I logged the time, 21:17 hours. I wrote it twice to be sure it would stay still. Emily arrived with coffee that regretted being warm. We ran the reasonable tests, cables, headsets, diagnostics. The voice returned between them, unbothered by our diligence. Owen didn't cross the threshold. He's good at not being in the wrong place, and better at arriving at the right time. I pretended not to notice either talent. It kept me useful. By afternoon, the radio quieted like a guilty thing. We agreed to leave it there. Consensus can be bravery or exhaustion. I nodded like a vote. Evening gave us an honest mistake. In Mainhab, a fogged mirror sits above a steel sink that tries to be clean. A work light cut across the glass, and the reflection lied by 2 or 3 degrees. A small tilt with a large consequence. The reflected beam pointed where no beam was pointing. If someone had been standing there, they would have been just out of frame. Jesus Christ. I meant it as a measurement. Owen stepped closer, then stepped back like the floor had exhaled. Emily wiped the mirror. The beam corrected more slowly than physics allows. We argued in small ways, using words you use when you want the world to keep its contract. Condensation, interference, fatigue. Pick one. She wasn't wrong. She wasn't right. Because we still trusted the dictionary over the dark. I tried to trust it too. The mirror had an excuse. The radio had an excuse. The ice had a dream. Bargains make rooms warmer. The wind changed after midnight. You can hear it. The way a door knows who just walked in. Temperature climbed where it had no business climbing. The corridor to the shaft picked up the taste the body understands before the mind does. Hot metal. Not engine, not wiring. A tool left too close to flame. Iron on the tongue. I breathed through my teeth, and it still found me. Warm metal. In the Arctic. The recorder fogged with my breath. At the shaft, the rails were warmer than the air. I didn't need a number to know. I leaned over. The dark below was a different shade than the dark above. That should not be a sentence anyone says. I said it anyway, so the recorder would have it. We set the beam for a maintenance pass. Light went down the throat of the world like a word. It touched walls that didn't want to be touched and came back redder. Evan watched instrument drift and called it nothing to save us from calling it something. Emily stared at the rim like numbers might confess. The letters carved into the inner ice had been a comfort. Carvings mean people. People mean tools. Tools mean intent we can indict, but carvings don't move when you look away. They don't fatten when the beam warms the air by a few degrees. They don't sag like wet ash. A flake let go, then another. Not chips, slough. A sheet as thin as old paper lifted from the wall and drifted toward me. The beam caught its edge, and the edge shivered. The characters weren't carved into the flake. They were the flake. Writing as substance. My glove met it because I forgot the part of Rule 5 that applies to hands standing too close to awe. It stuck. Not adhesive. Recognition. Like a word finding its mouth. Do not touch the words. Hilario's voice arrived before his hand. He pulled me back, and the beam split my shadow. The flake clung as if it had remembered what it had been waiting to remember. I had already touched them. Under the light, the characters lay on my glove like black water refusing to be wet. They didn't sink or smear. They arranged themselves into a curve that belonged to no alphabet and all of them at once. The curve adjusted when I breathed, narrow on the inhale, wide on the exhale. An organism measuring me for a sentence I wasn't ready to hear. Emily reached for a vial, then remembered Rule 2 and withdrew like she'd touched a stove. Owen lifted his flashlight and lowered it. Evan whispered a number he didn't believe. Reed said nothing with more concentration than some people used to speak. Ilario made the sign he was trained to make when language needs a leash. I turned my wrist. The flake loosened, not falling, but deciding to let go. It drifted back and met the wall without sound. The place it left behind looked like damage and wasn't. It was space the rest of the wall immediately envied. We stood long enough for the mind to try on 5 explanations designed to help us sleep. The station kept its indifferent note. The air cooled by a degree I pretended to feel. The smell of hot iron softened into cold we were built to understand. We wrote what we had to write. We didn't write what it meant. Meaning is a door you open once, and then you live in the next room forever. On my bunk, I checked the glove under the light. Nothing visible, only fabric. The recorder's small red eye watched me. I told it we were fine. I told it tomorrow we'd verify. I told it we'd be reasonable. I know what I sounded like. Someone negotiating with a tide. Someone trying to teach the dark how to keep promises. We agreed to call the day uneventful. We accepted the word even though it didn't apply. Agreement keeps roofs from caving when weather dislikes geometry. I slept late and poorly. When dream came, it came in alphabets I do not teach. Some ran left to right, some right to left, some in a circle whose center only exists when you need it. I woke to a station that had forgotten the dream. The shaft had not. I kept telling myself I was fine. I wasn't. I kept telling the recorder we were still inside the part where rules worked. We weren't. Afternoon arrived without a sun. My hand remembered the flake even though the glove showed nothing. Every time I flexed my fingers, the memory tightened, like a word testing the mouth it had chosen. I spread Washington's stills beside our photos on the galley table. If I let my eyes go soft, the marks braided into something that wasn't an alphabet, and wasn't random either. Rivers under ice when no one is counting. The Division 73 fragments were worse. Draft cadence genesis. The kind of line scholars deny in daylight and argue over at night. I built a lattice out of pieces that didn't want to sit together. A sentence crawled across the paper, not by letters, but by pressure. Grammar written in temperature and light. The syntax was older than the voice in my head. Older than obedience. I copied the line into my notebook because that is how you invite something and pretend you didn't. The rhythm felt like it had been waiting inside my chest. Not in the beginning, not let there be, but a correction written in the margin of a world. Ilario stood just outside the light, as if shade could keep him from being chosen. There is a 7th attempt. 7th what? The 6th is rest. Order's calendar, the lesson for children. It would not kneel. He released each sentence like a coin counted under a table. Not kneel, not obey, not creation, something created that refused the assignment. They froze it before it learned our names. He did not look at me when he said they. The plural belonged to an archive with keys I would never touch. I put the pencil down. The table trembled the way a heart swallows a mistake. I asked who they were. He answered by looking at the rule card tucked in my notebook. Rules are gifts we do not deserve, and punishments we cannot refuse. Emily came in with her lab book, saw the fragments, and set the book down too gently, like she was trying not to wake something. Sound as substrate. Rule 4 wasn't superstition. It was a leash. Not for meaning, for appetite. Our breath fed it. Our vowels fed it. I looked at the notes I'd shaped silently while copying and felt suddenly stupid in the precise way experiments prefer. Silence got heavy. We let it push our shoulders down. I fit one Washington fragment against a Borealis curve, then another. Where the ice refused to hold a mark, sense sharpened. The sentence didn't want reading, it wanted pacing. It wanted my lungs. I slowed down. I shouldn't have. The room cooled the way churches do when someone leaves a door half open. Evan stood behind me without speaking. Owen watched the corridor and the table both. Hilario's hands stayed empty. Metal taste. A memory I did not order. 1998. A monastery cell carved into stone. A mountain that eats fog. A young tongue flexing Latin like a dare. A prohibition treated like a puzzle. A door closed for good reasons, and the stupid sound of it learning me. I have never been forgiven properly. Reed's shadow leaned over the table. You were called because we do not want a third crater. A first site unnamed. A second turned into a map legend. A third waiting if our ignorance didn't quit on time. I told him craters are easier to bury than names. He agreed with posture. We moved to the dome because instruments feel like friends when the room loses shape. The core rim had a faint shimmer nobody ordered. The beam idled, and still the shaft felt lit by an idea. I arranged the photos around my notebook like anxious satellites. I rehearsed the line in my head without turning the key. The air in my mouth changed temperature. I did not speak. I let the words rest where breath becomes choice and refused to pay them with voice. Emily drifted closer to the rim. Heat shimmered that wasn't heat. Owen checked the beam angle and stopped midway. Hilario set both palms on the bench and closed his eyes. Not in prayer, but in posture. The sentence leaned forward. The old Latin from the mountain elbowed to the front, and I shoved it back. Vanity was loud. The thing I heard was older than Watt. It was grammar for animals with lungs. The impulse didn't pass. It grew teeth. My jaw ached. Vowels lined up like volunteers. I cupped a hand over my mouth, the way people do when beauty and wrongness arrive together. Emily's breath fogged and drifted sideways, as if the air had decided to disagree with gravity. The wall flexed, a heartbeat under ice. The beam brightened a fraction, with nobody at the control. Evan apologized to math under his breath. I tried to stop thinking the sentence. I tried naming tools. I tried reciting a grocery list from a kitchen I'd abandoned. I tried pretending I hadn't put a coin on my tongue in 1998 and learned what doors do when you insult them. The clauses assembled anyway. They got what they wanted. Pacing. My lungs did the rest. I walked closer. I shouldn't have. My hand hovered an inch above the ice. The surface cooled in response, so slightly it could have been my wish. Letters curved inward toward that pocket and held, listening. Hilario spoke to the room. There is no safety in unpronounced truth. He was right and wrong. Silence can be a leash, or a hand slipping from the collar. I thought of Emily repeating, "Do not answer." I thought of Rule 4 humming like a tuning fork with our names on it. I took the sequence I had built and inverted it. Not letters, the order of pressures. If it wanted a road in, I would map a road out. A lie I liked, because lies keep hands steady. I traced the inverted pattern in the air, not touching, a metronome for breath. Emily's eyes tracked the shape and found my face. Owen's hand hovered over the beam control. Hilario shook his head once, like a man who has seen fire choose. Do not answer it." She didn't raise her voice. Quiet travels better up here. I told myself I wasn't answering. I was thinking where it could hear. That is a difference that does not count. The beam lifted a notch without human permission. The core accepted it and shifted color half a shade toward blood. Air pressed into my ears without equalizing politely. Deep ice swelled and let go, swelled and let go. A breath slow enough to make seconds feel vulgar. I realized I had already answered, by pronouncing its grammar in my head. It didn't need my tongue. It needed the part of breath that turns air into promise. The wall pulsed. Letters near the rim unrolled like tendons learning to stretch. Not text, organs pretending to be text. The curve I'd traced repeated against the frost, not ink, not light. Pressure sketching itself into cold. It mirrored my pace with a delay that made me sick. Owen dropped the beam to baseline. The wall brightened anyway. Emily gripped the bench and made the sound careful people make when they cannot afford to scream. Evan whispered units suited to bodies and storms, never scripture. My inverted sequence doubled and closed into a loop. You cannot read a loop. You submit to being inside it, or you do not. The room chose for us. Inside. My lungs picked up a rhythm that wasn't mine. My heart miscounted and corrected by panic every third beat. I tasted copper. The floor translated our weight into options I didn't recognize. I stepped back, late. The wall held its calm like malice. The beam steadied at a level none of us had set. The recorder went very clean. The kind of clean that means a line has stopped being a line and become a tunnel. I closed the notebook. I put the glove back on the hand that remembered the flake. I told myself that counted as an apology. Ilario lifted his face to the rim and did not pray. This is a liturgy for air. He was right. We were the choir, even with our mouths closed. Owen checked his watch twice because time had started to lie. Evan underlined something, erased it, and underlined nothing. Reed finally gave the bureaucracy its line. We adjust procedures. We escalate containment. We do not improvise again. He looked at me on again. I nodded. Nods are cheaper than confession. I told the recorder we wouldn't repeat the sequence. I told it I wouldn't. I told it truth could wait. The room did not believe me. Neither did I. We backed away from the rim the way people back from animals they can't afford to wake. The beam stayed where the beam wanted. The wall rested the way predators rest, still in a manner that generates the next motion for free. I breathed out slow so the loop wouldn't steal the exhale. I breathed in shallow so it wouldn't teach me a new rhythm. I told my lungs, we will go home. I told my lungs, I am not the mouth you are looking for. I can say this now without lying. I had already spoken enough. Power didn't fail. It hesitated. Light stuttered like a tired pulse and decided to be red. Pressure climbed behind my ears and into my teeth. Ozone stung. Sulfur followed, thin at the edges like a rumor. The science dome flickered close enough to a heartbeat to make mine obedient. Shut them down! Now! Owen didn't wait for consent. He moved like muscle memory. Hands to panel, shoulder to door. Evan tried to stabilize voltage with the nervous faith of a man who still believes numbers can bargain with weather. Emily closed the lab book and braced the bench. The hum deepened until the room felt like a tuning fork held to bone. The wall around the beam separated from what it had been. A thread of black lifted like a scab that won't admit it's healed. Then another. The marks didn't flake. They articulated. Joint by joint, stroke by stroke, they peeled from the ice and walked along the light as if red were a rail. Back from the core! We all felt the floor answer. The shaft swelled and settled like lungs learning how. Letters swarmed the beam. They liked the heat like moths like candles. Air thickened. My ears closed and opened without permission. Power dipped. Instruments rattled in turns. The lights fell into a pattern too regular to be failure and too indifferent to be mercy. I tasted metal. The recorder clicked once and started to pant with us. We dragged cables clear and drew, without meaning to, a shape that pleased something. The letters noticed and wore it. The floor went slick with a skin that shouldn't exist at this temperature. We slid. Boots chased balance. Luke Abrams caught the rail late and lost it. The shaft lip gripped his boot like a mouth remembering teeth. What the hell? His voice cut because the floor cut. He hit, rolled, clawed. I reached without thinking, and the floor reached back. The beam's letters learned glove fabric fast. He dropped as a sentence is accepted by a page. A smear of blood followed. Brown, reluctant, undecided. Red climbed from below like dawn, the wrong way. Under the ice, a face practiced being a face. Eyes opened without reflection. Eyelids carried seams that were not flesh. Writing that had decided to hold a shape. Non tace. Ilario's Latin came measured and unwilling. The syllables didn't soothe the air. They honed it. The wall tightened the way a throat tightens before it swallows. The radio woke on its own. Internal channel. My voice read Genesis in my cadence and a half-beat late. It named me gently. I hated how gentle sounded. That is my voice. Echoes don't apologize. They make you complicit by returning your breath with interest. Evan dropped beam intensity a hair. The letters rerouted. They climbed the dome, found the vent grills, and disappeared into the station's lungs. Darkness arrived as substitution, not absence. The red remained like a habit that doesn't care what people think. Move! Move! Owen's tone put our feet where they had to go. The corridor felt downhill, though it wasn't. Rails were warm. Warmth here is confession. The door shuddered. Pressure argued with latches. God damn it, left module, now! We spilled through. Emergency lights chose red on purpose. Air thinned, then remembered us. Emily counted with her eyes and found what was missing by not finding. Evan shook a cramp from his hand as if a metric might fall out. Reed flinched from static that had teeth. Ilario watched the seam where ceiling met wall and moved his lips without voice. The vent spoke consonants, metal combed by something patient. The room shifted by degrees without moving. A table took one step left by remaining where it was. The bench shortened and then remembered it hadn't. I closed my eyes to fix the horizon. Behind eyelids, red persisted. We hold here! Owen gave geometry a chance. The red obeyed in volume, not in fact. The wall outside flexed inside. The sigh returned through vents as a whisper. The radio coughed my name and read a sentence I had only written. My handwriting wore my voice better than I did. The beam rose in the dome we'd left. We knew because the vents translated its decision into pressure. We had to shut it down. We had to stop feeding whatever lived on the difference between quiet and silence. Evan took the corridor, running uphill on flat floor. I went with him because I didn't want him to arrive at a sentence alone. Owen covered. Emily counted. Ilario touched the jam like he could tell the station a different story through skin. Reed spun the dial to a channel that did not exist. The dome door opened willingly, which is its own betrayal. Inside, the beam hung 3 inches above the emitter like obedience had become optional. Letters clung like barnacles remembering sea. The floor breathed, a sheet thin enough to be everywhere. Evan hit the panel. The emitter obeyed. The light did not. He threw the failsafe. The failsafe failed correctly. The room learned us as we worked. Owen launched a tarp into the path. Fabric went bright without burning, turned into a lantern, then into nothing. The letters dropped back to the beam as if embarrassed they had tried cloth. Emily began a warning and swallowed it. Tears were there without softness. I took one step too far, and without moving lips, half thought the inverted claws I'd built. Half a thought is still a shape. The beam shivered. The ceiling lowered an inch and then denied remembering. "Don't speak!" Her voice cracked. I bit my tongue and tasted iron. Blood teaches fast. The wall unfolded. A molting. Under that skin was architecture that had chosen brine and pressure as grammar. I reached the rail and stopped because Owen's grip on my collar turned into law. The letters pulsed once in response to the distance between my mouth and my will. The vents answered with friction and dust. Consonants improved. "Hold your ground." His voice did not need volume. The red thickened. The breath under the floor took a cadence that wasn't ours. The first push made me lean. The second made me correct. The third taught my knees the idea of kneeling. I refused and felt the expiration date on refusal. The vents coughed my name inside out. The letters along the rim arranged a smile made of grammar. It didn't require a mouth to threaten. We fell back and the station liked the choreography. "God damn it, left module, now!" We ran the same wrong hill corridor. Door stubborn. Owen shouldered it and won. We collapsed into red and counted again. Luke was not among us. His absence took a chair. Emily pressed gauze to Owen's forearm where letters had tested possession and failed. Evan stared at his palms like numbers might appear. Reed kept searching for a frequency where authority still worked. Ilario put his forehead to the wall and lifted it slowly. "Well, that's just perfect." The soldier's gallows humor landed, did nothing, and helped. We moved because moving was the only remaining choice. The station had started writing us into itself. Stillness just made better ink. We tried again because old ideas die late. Evan and I took opposite angles on the dome. Owen drew a border with presence and made it stick for as long as breath allowed. The beam greeted us like it had been waiting at exactly this height. Letters covered surfaces the way lichen covers stone after first thaw. The ceiling learned cursive and wrote the room in loops. Evan pulled the hidden breaker. The emitter died properly. The light stayed. It turned toward vents and corners and wherever air hides, faster now. He whispered an apology to math that didn't help. I gave it what it wanted least, no sound. I closed my mouth, dropped my eyes, tried to be a room without acoustics. For one breath, the pressure let go. On the next, it returned insulted. It prefers arguments. It prefers throats.
A bubble of pressure traveled the floor and lifted the room an inch, set it down an inch left, and asked us to deny it. A wrench slid. A helmet rolled and decided against falling. A man was moved sideways instead of down. The dome had replaced gravity with grammar. The next sound was shaped, not loud. My name again. The line again. A response forming without consent. I tried thinking in fragments, half clauses, broken phrases. Half a clause still counts. The dome replied. It didn't crack. It detonated inward without shrapnel, like a lung choosing exhale too hard. The ice bowed and snapped, and kept bowing as if we had requested breathing by mistake. Frost jumped from the ceiling, landed on the bench in characters that evaporated without water. The vents coughed, then laughed, then cleared their throats, like a choir before a hymn. "Don't speak!" I hadn't. Thinking was enough. I bit my tongue again and let blood rewrite who owned my mouth. Red steadied. The rim calmed. Satisfaction, not peace. The breath under the floor set a tempo it liked. Letters along the walls stopped moving and began to hold. Motion is experiment. holding is doctrine. We gathered at the threshold because humans trust doorways even when doors are permissions. The station settled into a pattern that allowed standing. The vents lowered their voice to a hum that wins arguments over hours. The radio chose silence. Luke remained gone. Owen's sleeve tore where letters had tried and failed to keep him. Emily's hands were steady over a wound that didn't bleed the way wounds do. Evan leaned on a crate and blinked at palms that would not provide a chart. Reed took attendance without names. Ilario looked at the rim like a man who has seen a chapel turned machine. We hadn't woken it. We'd let it remember waking. The wind kept us company. It was louder than prayer, and it did not pick sides. By the time we reached the ridge above the Borealis site, half the station was already under snow. The rest was remembering how to sink. Owen marked the coordinates and turned the beacon toward the white, but the storm erased everything faster than electronics could swear. The horizon was no longer a direction. We left behind what couldn't walk, what couldn't be named, what might still be learning how to breathe. We kept walking because stopping meant listening. The helicopter never made it. The signal came instead from Eureka Station, a pattern too precise to be weather. Morse without hand, pulse without sender. Evan said it was a bounce. I knew better. Things that learn shape can also learn repetition. They found us 3 days later near the A13 pad, wrapped in what was left of the emergency tarp. Emily's hands had frost down to the lines of her fingerprints. Owen's radio was fused into receive. Ilario's cross had turned the same color as the sky. I was awake. I don't remember deciding that. A month later, in Fort Greely, they pulled the recorder from my pack. The engineers called it a miracle it still worked. They copied the data, filed the paperwork, and sent someone to ask questions I pretended not to understand. When the playback reached the last minute, the room went quiet. My voice was still speaking, though the battery had died long before they found us. I am leaving this for anyone who still mistakes silence for safety. The words sound slower than I remember saying them. The tape breathes between syllables like it is trying to forget English. I keep my sleeve rolled down, but the skin remembers anyway. The frostbite healed where it wanted to, not where it should. A few marks stayed, small, black, neat. Not scars, not burns, script. Sometimes, when I exhale, they itch. Sometimes, when I hold my breath, they warm. It asks for breath. We are generous creatures. I've learned to sleep sitting up. It listens when I lie flat. The hum in my chest answers it whether I want to or not. There's rhythm in the ribs now. Something trying to finish a sentence it started underground. At night, when the power hum dips, I hear it closer. Behind the air vents, beneath the floor. Like a word rearranging itself, looking for a throat. We opened the wrong book. I know that's not the right sentence, but it's the only one that keeps me from saying the true one. If someone tells you that Scripture is only what we wrote, pray that they are correct. Because if it was written in us first, it will be written again. In you.